Can we please have the door shut so that we can start the session? I'm sorry that we don't have room inside this place. We take responsibility for a small room, but it helps to create the rush. Can we please shut the door so we can start the session? Thank you. I'd like to introduce our moderator for the first book, City of Gold and Silver by Keniz Murad, Alia Alia Iqbal Naqvi. Thank you, Alia.
Before we start, lots of people have been asking about books. I'm afraid Liberty Books only received a small consignment, which has all been sold out between yesterday and today. They are taking orders for more, and we should receive more books shortly. Yeah, they'll be available at all the branches later. So we're here today to talk about Keniz Murad's latest book. Can we close the door, maybe?
Please.
Mohsin, you want to do some crowd control?
Please, ये mic on करना जी. Mic on करना इधर से. Please close the door.
In the City of Gold and Silver was originally written in French. The English edition has just been published by Full Circle in India. The heroine of the book is Begum Hazrat Mahal, the favorite queen of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, the last king of Awadh. She's a fascinating character, and surprisingly, unfortunately, we know quite little about her. She was born, apparently, I didn't know this before I read the book, into a humble family of artisans in Lucknow, and rose to become Wajid Ali Shah's favorite wife. And eventually, during the 1857 uprising, she became Queen Regent of Awadh and a very important leader in the struggle against the British. After Wajid Ali Shah's exile, Hazrat Mahal took charge of affairs in Awadh. She banded together local elites. She collaborated with the rebel chiefs and almost succeeded in establishing independence once again in Awadh. In fact, perhaps more independence than had been enjoyed under Wajid Ali Shah. Keniz Murad is a French writer and journalist, well known to many of you. She's written for numerous French newspapers and magazines, in particular Le Nouvel Observateur, covering the Middle East and South Asia. She's the author of several books, both fiction and non-fiction, and her books have been on bestseller lists all over the world. In fact, the one we're discussing is currently climbing the bestseller list in India very fast. Last check, it was number 4, and hopefully it'll be number 1 soon. She's won several awards, much decorated by the French government. She was born in Paris, but Keniz is actually half Turkish and half Indian Muslim. Her mother was an Ottoman princess, and her father was an Indian Muslim prince. Many of you may know her very popular first novel, which was based on the life of her mother, Princess Salma, and in English was called Farewell, Princess. In 2012, the French government endowed Keniz with the prestigious French Order of the Arts and Letters. She's also the patron of the annual South Asian Book Fair in Paris. We only have half an hour or less now, but there are lots of questions I want to ask about this. How do I do that? Press the button. Okay. I think you're fine. Yeah? Okay. To begin with, how did you come upon this topic and how did you do the research for it?
Well, I came upon this topic because when I was in India in the 70s, there was a very dignified and rather poor gentleman who was coming to see my father. And he was a great-grandson of Begum Hazrat Mahal, which, you know, it seems so far away, but after all, it's only 4 generations. It's only 4 generations. So this great-grandson of the Begum was called Prince Anjum, was talking a lot about Begum Hazrat Mahal, giving a lot of details on her life, and I became very interested, of course. After that, I made a career of journalist. I wrote other books, but a few years ago, I thought of this extraordinary lady, and I went back to Lucknow, and first I searched about her in all the libraries in England. London, Oxford, Cambridge, nothing about her, very little. I found in the Times of India something very interesting, no, not the Times of India, sorry, the Times of London, a very interesting sentence, which is, the Times 1858, the Begum of Awadh shows greater strategic sense and courage than all our generals put together. So Times 1858. And the English also called her the soul of the revolt. So I was wondering why, because there's no book written, no real book written about her. Even in Urdu, you have small booklets which are more praising, in fact. And in some books, you have some chapters about her also, but no book really about her life. So as I said, there was about nothing in England. I went to Delhi, very little also. Then in Lucknow, mostly I found. And I found going and seeing all the old families of Lucknow whose ancestors have been fighting along with the Begum against the British. And they told me a lot of things. And also, of course, there was in some books, and also something very interesting as a source, was papers of the mutinies, all the telegrams exchanged between the British during what they call the mutiny, these 2-3 years. And this was collected, all these telegrams were collected by the government of Uttar Pradesh in 1957 for the centenary. And there you find quite a lot about the Begum. You find how she was leading battles on her elephant, how she was promulgating laws. She was not only, what is very interesting about her, she had been a woman confined in the Zenana. In fact, she had been brought up to become a courtesan, one of these fantastic courtesans of Lucknow. But she never became a courtesan because she was chosen by the crown prince to become one of his fairies, meaning his dancing girl, etc. But she was also a poetess. She was very intelligent. So finally, he married her, and she had a son from him. And that's how she became important, because when the English annexed the kingdom of Awadh, which was which was the richest of North India, the population revolted with the sepoy, and they needed a figurehead. So they went to see the wife, which has stayed in Lucknow. And all of them were quite frightened. But only Hazrat Mahal was the youngest. She was 24, 25, and she had a son of 10 years old. She said, I am ready. So her son was crowned, but of course he was a child. So she became the regent, and she showed, she was such a intelligence and courage and force. Not only she led the rebellion from Lucknow, as you know, Lucknow was the main center of the rebellion, and she was the main person in Lucknow, but she also promulgated laws, and she really ruled over Awadh for quite a time. Anyway, she kept the British at bay for 9 months, and after, when the British army, which were very, very well equipped, came and retook Lucknow, she fled with her army on horseback, and for more than a year, she made guerrilla warfare, hit and run, against the British, and against the Nawab and the Rajas who were beginning to go towards the British. So she was really, she went on and on and on, when most of them, the others, had left the struggle, had abandoned the struggle. She was pushed toward the Terai, and finally, all her army being decimated, she went to Nepal, where she was a virtual captive and died there. But, she was really, I wonder why she had nobody was talking. Everybody's talking about Rani of Jhansi, and nobody about her. She's totally ignored, apart from Lucknow and Awadh, UP, part of UP. She has been forgotten. And I think because the English, maybe at the beginning, did not want to admit that a woman kept them at bay for so long. But also after that, after independence, I feel that nobody in India wanted to give due regards to a Muslim lady, because of course, a trauma of partition, etc. So, and after she was totally forgotten. So I wrote this book because I thought, you know, it's so unfair. But I wrote this not only to revive this extraordinary lady. I also wrote it because she's an example of a Muslim woman who has been confined in the Zenana and who shows such strength and courage and ability to rule. And you know, today that people are talking so much, especially in the West, obviously, of how Muslim women are submissive, are this and this and that. I wanted to tell the story of this extraordinary woman. Also, in this book, like in most of my book, I talk about progressive Islam. She was a very progressive lady. She went, well, she was keeping her veil, of course, but she went out of Purdah. Of course, she was leading the army. And though she was, and she was also confronting extremist religious extremism. We're criticizing her, like today. I mean, the problems we have today are also very much in that book. And also, there was something about, I wanted to talk about the situation, how when one is strong, and I want, maybe Alia is going to read something. The Hindu Patriot, which is a Indian paper, from Maharashtra, in 1857 wrote this, which can apply exactly to the circumstances of today.
Yeah. So this chapter begins. The annexation of Awadh scandalizes public opinion throughout India, and in 1857 the Hindu Patriot writes, "What is true of the common thief who steals an apple is also true of the hero who annexes a state. If in the first case the offense against morality condemns the culprit, then how can the usurper not be condemned even more vehemently? Awadh is ill-governed, we are told, so let us annex Awadh. Hyderabad is oppressed, then let us depose its sovereign. But if one follows this reasoning, no kingdom in the world will be safe any longer from its neighbor's aggression, inasmuch as accusations of bad government will fly the moment a powerful, unprincipled state wants to seize a weaker state unlucky enough to possess riches the former covets."
So it's exactly what we see today, and I would like also Alia to read what I put at the beginning, a sentence of William Dalrymple. As you know, I have been a journalist, I've been a political journalist, so politics is always coming in my books also, in my novels.
There are two quotes at the beginning of the book. One, Kinize has already read for you. The Times of London said of her that she shows greater strategic sense and courage than all her generals put together. The second quote is from William Dalrymple, in which he says, "The lessons of the 1857 insurrection are clear. No one likes another people conquering their territory, depriving them of their land, or forcing them to adopt better ideas under the threat of arms. In 1857, the British discovered what the United States are learning now. Nothing radicalizes a people so greatly or undermines moderate Islam to such an extent as an aggressive intrusion."
And I think we see that so vividly today all over the world, Iraq, Syria, Libya, etc. And I want to point something, that I had to censor the sentence of William Dalrymple, otherwise I would not have been published in France. So I tell you the sentence, the full sentence was, in 1857, the British discovered what the United States and Israel are learning now. Nothing radicalized. I had to censor it because otherwise I was not published in France. It's very important.
Should we move to reading the passage you selected? Would you like to introduce it? It comes at what point in the story? I think it's just after
After she takes power.
Wajid Ali Shah has been exiled, Awadh has been annexed. But the rebel leader in UP has connected with Hazrat Mahal. She has agreed to be the figurehead of the revolt, but she takes charge rather more than they bargained for. She calls a meeting of her novels. At precisely 4 o'clock, the Queen Regent enters, preceded by her Turkish guards in their dark green uniforms. Sumptuously dressed in a gharara interwoven with gold and decorated with pearls, she slowly steps forward, no longer wrapped in her veils as she had appeared on Coronation Day. Today her face is uncovered. A light gauze veil is draped over her hair, in a gesture indicating to all present that it is not the woman presiding over these government sessions, but the regent and the leader of the government, and as such, Parda has no place here. Its significance is not lost on the men assembled before her. Their first reaction is one of shock, but above all, her beauty perturbs them, and so they avert their eyes. Nonetheless, they have to answer her explicit questions on this or that point on the agenda, and slowly they pull themselves together. Hazrat Mahal smiles to herself, satisfied. She enjoys repeating the words spoken by the Prophet's granddaughter Zainab, who refused to wear a veil. If God gave me beauty, it is not for me to hide it. And maliciously she notes that if women's beauty disturbs men so much, they can always choose to look the other way. Raja Jailal is the first to present his report. As the majority of the sepoys have gone to Delhi, we have 20 regiments under our command, about 15,000 men. It will not be enough if Calcutta sends reinforcements. We are at an even greater disadvantage as our weapons are highly inferior to those of the British. Our soldiers are equipped with the inaccurate Brown Bess rifles that have a range of 200 meters against their Lee Enfields with a range of 800 meters. And the only cannons we have are outdated and far less powerful than their howitzers. Lastly, we are likely to run out of ammunition very soon. His words elicit worried comments. The regent makes herself heard over the hubbub. Why not reinstate the thousands of soldiers and officers belonging to the former Royal Army, who, having been dismissed by the British, are now unemployed? That would give us about 30 more regiments. As for the ammunition, can we not quickly set up a factory and engage enough men to produce the quantities we need? The problem, says Raja Balkishan, Huzur, is that we have no money. He's the finance minister. As your majesty saw with her own eyes, Captain Birch had the state treasure forcibly transported from Qaisar Bagh to the residency. And she replies, but as far as I know, we still have His Majesty's private treasure. I have no idea where it is, Huzur. His Majesty sealed it himself and entrusted it to 2 of his right-hand men. I doubt they will agree. Have them brought here immediately, says Hazrat Mahal. We will try to find them, Huzur. Raja Sahib, I am convinced that if you try, you will succeed, interrupts Hazrat Mahal coldly. And then, seemingly oblivious to the murmurs of the dignitaries, she turns to the governor, who has come to report the situation in town. It is a disaster, Huzur. All the bazaars are completely deserted. The shopkeepers have shut their shops. After the extensive damage perpetrated by the pillaging soldiers, there is no grain to be found anywhere except in the black market at exorbitant prices, so much so that part of the population is starving. Hazrat Mahal cannot repress an outburst of anger. Summon the tradesmen's leaders and have their grain purchased at the normal rate. Then, in the name of the king, you will organize a distribution of grain for the needy. Be sure to have it proclaimed all over Lucknow and in the surrounding villages that we will show no mercy. Those who starve the people will be hanged. And glaring at the shocked assembly, she continues with her stringent measures. Remember, we are at war, gentlemen. If we do not impose strong discipline, our enemies will soon get the better of us. In which case, it will not be just a few dishonest traders who will be hanged, but all of us present here. She realizes from their reaction of stony silence and apprehensive looks that this time her words have left their mark.
So you will wonder how I wrote this, because of course it's a historical novel, it's not a biography. And obviously, as you see, I was not behind the curtain to listen to Hazrat Mahal. So what I do, of course, all the historical facts are very, very precise. The only thing I took some liberty is in the dialogue. But what I do, I study very much all the circumstances. I study the psychology. I know very well the old society of Lucknow because I've been myself in Perth at my father's house for months and months. So I know a lot. I know quite well this. Anyway, so from that, I don't invent. I recreate what could have happened and what I really think has happened. We know, this is an example, we know that she passed very strong laws against the black marketeers, that we know, we have that on the documents. We know also that, you were talking of, sorry. We know also that the treasure had been taken by the British, but there was a private treasure of the king left. And, well, we know quite a lot of things, and from that, I put that in dialogues. I don't put them as, facts, but in dialogues, I recreate dialogues. So I did that. Also, there are very interesting sentence I found also. For instance, a British governor at the time from Calcutta was telling, we must annex award, we must bring the human values to these people. It is a fight of good against evil. It's exactly the sentence that Mr. Bush said when he wanted to invade Iraq. So the same thing, it's so much. Anyway, so to come back to how I did work, I told you how I look for all the, but how I did work, I try again to put myself in the atmosphere and in the skin of the hero heroine. I took one liberty, I must say, which is a real liberty in the book. But I think that it may be true. But I'm going to tell you because some people did not like it, I know. She was meeting every day, that we know, Raja Jailal Singh. He was the chief of the army, and he was also a member of the government at a very high post. So every day she was seeing him, and he was telling him about what was happening and what was there. And I imagine that after months and months of meeting each other, her husband is not only far away, he is having a very, very gay life in Calcutta. He has been given a lot of money to rebuild a new palace. He has new ferries, new wives. So he's not very unhappy, and she is struggling every day in terrible circumstances. So I imagine a romance does develop between this young, dashing, courageous Hindu Raja and her. So, and I insist on the thing, well, he was Hindu, he's a real person, but I was wanting to insist also on the fact that, the title is In the City of Gold and Silver, because Lucknow then, it was called, the culture of Lucknow was called the culture of gold and silver, Ganga Jamni culture. And there was such a conviviality, I would not say tolerance is the wrong word, conviviality between Hindu and Muslims. The Muslim going to the Hindu religious festivities, the Hindu going to the Muslim ones. The king, Wajid Ali Shah himself, was every year putting up a play where he was acting Krishna. And he was putting a blue turquoise powder and peel on his body, and he was dancing Krishna. So, there was such a tolerance, such a conviviality, such a blending of culture, which gave the most amazing culture, in fact, of North India, and things that we would be very happy to have today. So, well, again, the liberty I took was about this romance. The rest is very, very near to the reality. Every dialogue, I imagine, are dialogue with a basis of real facts, real things which happen.
I think we're out of time, but just to announce again, the books that the books that we got have been all sold out, but Liberty Books is taking orders. So please go to the stall, or perhaps we'll have somebody come here.
We'll have some paper, and we'll take the.
We'll
orders.
take your name and number down and give it to the store. They will call you when the books come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry?
do it outside.
Do we have time for one or two audience questions?
Yes.
Can we,
We have 5
draft
minutes.
some? Okay, thank you. We keep it down to one or two questions, please.
Your research about Hazrat Mahal, did you ever come across the lack of support by the French? Because Lucknow was very close to the French, and General Lord Martin, he was there, and Lucknow had a very obvious influence of Lucknow, French culture. They were very close. So why didn't the French support Hazrat Mahal?
But
They were in
the French, no, that left India, the French at the time. I mean, they were no more powerful in India. You know, they were in the small counters, and they were no more powerful. No, they were nowhere in very little in India at that time. The French, very, very little. Oh, if
Well, we might
One
as well
more
been
question
speaking
should we
French
have?
today for starters. And we have a question here.
Hazrat Mahal is one of my heroines, and I wrote about her in a movie I made, teeny tiny movie.
oh,
My resource was totally Amresh Mishra, who wrote about her in a book about Lucknow.
yeah.
So I'm thrilled to bits.
There's a
about the
lot.
book. I bought it,
Thank
of
you.
course, in Delhi,
There's a-
and I'm so happy I made it to sign her book.
okay.
But she is a hero we all need to know about, and I'm immensely proud that you've done this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have the reading from our second book, which is The Democracy Train. Sayyid Jafar Ahmed will be the moderator for this session. Thank you.
Would you put this on?
So, just one thing, sorry. If you want to give your names when we are outside with your telephone, so that Liberté Bookshop can call you after they will have the book after 4 or 5 days.
For those of you who want to move out now, would you please do so quickly so we can start our next session? Thank you. And the signing will be outside for those who have the books. Please close the door. Sorry, please close the door now. We need to start the session. Sorry.
Right, please start.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's move from Awadh and UP to Pakistan and our beloved, the province of Sindh. The book we are going to discuss is Aboard the Democracy Train, a journey through Pakistan's last decade of democracy, written by Nafisa Hoorie. Nafisa is known to all of us. Still, I think that for a couple of people who may not be knowing her, I would say that she is a prominent journalist. She, after finishing her studies, joined the profession of journalism. She was a staff reporter of Daily Dawn, and she was the first lady reporter in English journalism, and certainly must have been the first in Urdu journalism also. She visited different parts of Pakistan as part of her assignments, and more particularly the 1988 to 1999 period was covered by her, and on occasions she went to the interior of Sindh on a train, and as we see in this book, she has discovered Sindh, a Sindh which is poor, a Sindh which is full of contradictions, and she later put that down in her reports, in her writings. And now for the last few years, she's in United States of America doing some broadcasting. There she decided to write this book. And as I mentioned at another occasion, that Nafisa has grown with Pakistan. So what has happened with this country is known to her. She is all too familiar with the transformation of this city from a very peaceful city to a very volatile place. So all that experience, all that knowledge has been translated into this book, and we have a good account of Pakistan's last, say, 30 or 40 years, and today we are going to discuss this with her. Nafisa also thinks that instead of reading a few passages from the book, she would like the opportunity to be given to the audience so that they also interact with her, put certain questions which she would like to answer. I'll put one or two questions. My first question to Nafisa is this. What made you think to write this book? I mean, was there any inspiration? This is perhaps your first book.
Yes. Well, I'd like to talk about the things that I have not talked about in my book, which will give you an idea as to what inspired me to write it. And basically, I have, as you know, been living in the US for the last decade or so. And it was after 9/11 that I was given this offer by a very prominent publishing company. They wanted me to write a book on Pakistan which could actually describe the region to American readers and to Western readers. Now, the whole problem with the Western media is that they have very fixed opinions, very fixed notions about the way our lives are conducted. And so the type of book they wanted me to write was not the type of book that I wanted to write. And so even at the cost of not going very high profile and selling millions of copies, becoming a millionaire, well, that's every writer's dream, I chose to wait all those years, and I chose to invest in a London publishing company. Consequently, in 2011, Anthem Press London published my book. And it was a book based mainly on the memory that I had of Pakistan when I worked as the only woman reporter on the front lines of dawn. Those were really difficult years for my contemporaries who will remember what we had to go through, how much toil and how many dangers we had to face. And being the only woman reporter, you can imagine that I too had my share of the problems. So for me, it was a memory, it was a visit down memory lane when in the last few years I recreated those years. And so I would say that 2/3 of my book is based on the period between 1988 to 1999, when we had two governments led alternately by Benazir Bhutto and Mia Nawaz Sharif. And the fact is that neither governments were able to complete their tenures. Now, I, as an eyewitness, went behind the scenes and I write about the forces, the machinations, which prevented these governments from completing their tenures. Also, because I have been away and I have looked at Pakistan from an international perspective, I have seen how Pakistan has suffered in the last decade or so. Because while we have been a frontline state in the war against terror, Pakistan has itself become terrorized. And for me, it was important to link the past with the present and to show how militancy developed over the years because of the type of society we had, unstable society, with militant wings and a true absence of law and order, and the failure of governance. So my book tries to be a very current affairs book. It actually even goes before 1988. But in total, I would say that it is a current affairs book that encompasses the last 30 years and tries to bring the Pakistani and the foreign reader up to date on the politics of Pakistan.
Thank you. I would like to ask that translating a knowledge drawn from the social and political realities of your country must have been a very creative experience also, must have been a very personal experience also for you. So would you like to share how you explain that?
Absolutely. I think that writing itself is a very creative process. I often compare it to constructing a building where one puts brick after brick after brick, and then one paints it, and then one steps back and then demolishes it again because one is not happy with the way that it reads. So, for example, good writing means writing again and again, because one is not satisfied with the way that things look like on paper. For myself, of course, it's a very personal experience because, of course, the anecdotes that I have given, the stories that I have told are written through my experience. And if there are people who will criticize me for interjecting myself too much, I should tell you that the main purpose was because Americans, Western readers have no idea about the complex nature of our country. And so I inserted myself to allow the reader to travel through me and to understand the history and politics of Pakistan through my persona. So I would say it was a journey down memory lane, a very creative process. And I must say that I also had help from American editors who helped me throughout the process. The way they would help me is not to write my paragraphs for me, but to ask me to talk to them. And so it was a kind of an oral history which allowed me to step back and see how a foreigner, a Westerner, would read our history. And that allowed me to develop chapter after chapter after chapter.
Nafisa, could you have written this book had you been in Pakistan?
That's a really good question, and I really wonder if I could have. And I think maybe not, because I think nostalgia works in very strange ways. I think that our minds recreate memories which come back to you when you are in solitude. So America and England and those places give you a type of solitude that allows you to reflect very deeply. Here one is surrounded by noise all the time. And of course, as I like to say that when I was reporting, it was literature in a hurry.
Okay.
And in order to unpack, one needs time and space. And so all the memories and all the incidents and everything that was packed into my being started getting unpacked from a distance. And so I would say that in order to write well, one needs solitude, one needs distance.
Distance is important.
Exactly.
Right, thank you. One more question. Your description of interior Sindh is quite moving. I mean, you went to the Havelis of the landlords and you saw the poverty on railway stations. Would you like to shed some light on what Sindh you have been able to discover?
You see, even when I worked as a journalist, my main issue with upper class people, educated, living in the urban areas, has been that they are divorced from knowing the rest of the country. And this was a feeling that I tried to remove when I worked in a Dawn newspaper, which was to bring rural Sindh into Karachi and try to act as a bridge. Because, of course, I went to an English medium school, and having the facility of language, I could connect with the English-speaking crowd. But then, on the other hand, I found this vast ignorance about the rest of the country and the way that people in rural areas live. And to my mind, there can be no progress until people are intimately involved in the development of the whole country. After all, we cannot just have a few million people, or we don't even have that many, to rule the country. We need really to connect. And of course, given my experiences, given the experiences I had in those days, I have brought all those experiences back into the book. I've sort of woven it creatively to allow people who don't even know their own country to try to understand it through my writings.
I think I'll put the last question from my side. I mean, I would say that now that you have had the access to the material reality of Pakistan, and you have also seen the ethos of the Pakistani people, how you see the future of this country?
Well, you know, there's always room for optimism, and there are so many intelligent and creative people who are looking for a sense of direction. It always strikes me that Pakistan is one of the most interesting countries in the world, and that's because it has such a diversity of people here, such a different mix of people. And you know, the literary festival is an example of this, that even when one is crying about how the rest of the country is living, one can have intellectuals gathered together to talk about the future, to talk about art, literature, you know. So let me not get pessimistic. Of course, there are times when I know that there are times that many people in this room must have wanted to run away and forget about Pakistan because of the sense of anarchy, the sense of hopelessness, the constant instability in the political system. But whenever that happens, basically one has to stand back and say, after all, this is my country, and if I make a contribution to this country, it's not only going to benefit me, my friends, my relatives, but my children and the future generations. And that's the type of feeling that I bring, and that's the type of feeling my book tries to convey.
What are your future plans, Nafisa? Do you intend to write more on Pakistan and in the same fashion?
I can just say that having lived in the United States, I have become extremely interested about the future of the region once the US begins to withdraw from Afghanistan. That's a fascinating topic because for the last 10 years we have seen the fallout of US involvement, and I think that there are some very interesting changes that are happening in the region in terms of our Pakistan's changing relationship with India, with Iran, even with China. And you know, nothing concrete right now, but writing is a very inspiring thing. It's an inspiring process,
yeah,
because it means putting your thoughts down on paper and having people read it. And then, you know, the feedback itself gives you such a uplift. So, of course, writing is very much in the cards.
Hey, what's the feedback so far?
The feedback has been wonderful. I have had 2 launches so far, and all the books have been sold out in Karachi and Hyderabad. And I think what has been so exciting is that people or my contemporaries have identified very closely with the period that I have written about, because many of them just pick up the book, and given that they have the context in their minds, it's like a mirror for them. Many folks in Pakistan have identified so closely with the book. Plus, a lot of interesting people are named in this book, people that you and I know very well.
Yeah.
And given that I had proximity with some of the main players, the politicians, from Benazir Bhutto to Asghar Khan to you name it, people will find themselves in this book. And I think that's something that they are also looking for, because they want to know where they were in the 80s or 90s when the book was being written.
Right. I think now we should take a few questions from the audience. Is there any question? I mean, the floor is open to you. Yes. First you, and then yes, you may ask.
The lady came first. She put up her hand first.
Give it to her.
I would like to ask you, madam, how was it received in the West? Because actually you have written it for the Western audience. How was it received there? We naturally would be interested because we want to know. We know all the things. But how was it received in America and the West?
Well, I'm happy to tell you that it has been on the Amazon bestsellers list in the category of Pakistan history. Now, this is not to say that it's there every day, but every few days it shoots up in the 100 best-selling books on Pakistan history, plus in the category of Indian history, plus in the category of democracy. The feedback that I had a launch in New York last year. It was extremely positive. But people was like fielding questions about Pakistan on and on and on. And I actually think it appeals to people who already know more about Pakistan rather than just an average reader.
But by and large, are people interested wanting to know about us or these?
Well, Pakistan has really been in the news since 9/11.
No, but for all the wrong reasons.
That is true. That is true. And I think that the US media is a difficult media to penetrate because, as we know, that there are powerful interests that move it. But on the other hand, the American intelligentsia has been quite open to the book, and it's they who have given very good reviews. It has been well received. It could be better received. We all wish that people in the West would look at us and our complex history more intimately. But I think a start has been made, and I think that it has actually penetrated the US market to some extent.
Yes, please.
I am Dr. Nawaz.
After him, please.
At the same time, I am also a public activist. I believe that little action is better than sound knowledge. I will ask to Nafisa that when she was writing miseries of this section of word, what was the reaction of Americans? Because we people believe here, especially who are working in the masses, we think that the American policies, they are reflecting and giving all these miseries as a downward. So have you discussed with them what the people here think and what the people of American thinking when they are voting to their people who coming in the power and who are also governing the Pakistan power? This is my question to you.
Well, very quickly, I will say that foreign policy is the preserve of very few people. So, for example, even in Washington, if there are think tanks, they are, attended by elite people who are deeply, deeply rooted in American government. They are former senators, former Republican, office bearers. It's very difficult to penetrate them. It's the people who became interested in Pakistan for the wrong reasons, as a member of the audience said. But even if you get interested for the wrong reasons, there are articles that you tend to read much more. And that is something that has happened. So, for example, in the last 10 years, Americans know much more about Pakistan, and it's easier to start a conversation with them because you get more feedback from them. And that is a positive thing.
Your question?
I was just going to ask you, you seem to have settled in America. So would you like to come and live in today's Pakistan?
As I like to say to people, I never left Pakistan. So if you take that as the answer, we can leave it at that.
Another question? Is there any question now? No?
This isn't a question. It's you're abroad the train of democracy. Has it started? Is it moving? That's what I'd like to ask you.
Is it still moving or it is standing on a platform?
Does that need an answer? Okay, it doesn't. All right.
Azhar sir?
Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of discussions in the last couple of days, and we've had one particularly interesting one on Afghanistan, the end game. I don't know whether you heard that, but there was a consciousness of doom and gloom, and that things are going beyond control. And without saying so in so many words, they felt that, there were two foreign secretaries, there was Zahid Hussain, and they were I think Najam was the compare. And the feeling was that after the Americans withdraw or cut down to size, there'd be about a few thousand American soldiers left, but that Talibanization was inevitable. Now, this is the scenario that serious people think is looming on the horizon. I like the optimism and I would like to share it, but as someone from a distance, looking at Pakistan from a distance, what is your, and with your knowledge of what's going on in foreign policy in America, how do you feel it can be averted, and if so, how? Just like your impressions on that. Thank you.
Well, I think that, the rulers have made a mess of things with regards to the Taliban. The phenomenon, of course, of Talibanization has grown immensely. After 9/11, the number of Al-Qaeda who migrated to the FATA areas and the number of Taliban who came here, and the deliberate policy of the government of supporting a good Taliban versus bad Taliban, that really made a mess of things. I am not hopeful, not as optimistic that things are going to improve, especially because I see the Taliban's offshoots, their militant wings, have begun to make inroads in the most unruly parts of Pakistan. Baluchistan, for example, where the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, inflicts damage on Hazaras and other ethnic minorities. Even Karachi has become a hotbed of sectarianism. The only thing I think is that if we create these islands, and if right-thinking people like yourself, myself, and I know that there's a lot of political activity that's taking place right now. There are mergers, there are political alliances that are occurring. I think that's a very positive sign. I think that is the way to go to keep the secular momentum alive. This is the only thing I think we can do as civil society, as members of civil society. I share your pessimism. Things have gotten from bad to worse, but we need to continue these islands of hope.
Thank you. One last question, Shima. Would you just bring the mic?
Thank you, Nafisa. Having known you since more than 30 years from the time you were working in Karachi, the thought that comes to my head is when you are thinking back and reflecting on the time that you were working in Pakistan, in Karachi, and you traveled in Sindh, and perhaps being very associated to Sindh, being associated part of a Sindhi family, I just wonder that did you find that at that time this kind of fundamentalism that has emerged now, was it still there in society at that time? Did you find it in your travels to rural Sindh and whatever work that you did? Did you see it manifested or somewhere lying there which has now emerged in this way? That's just a question that I would like to put to you.
Yes, I do find fundamentalism has reared its ugly head, in a very major way. And, the incident in Sita village, where a person who took refuge and he was accused of burning the Quran and then thrown from the top story and burnt to death. This was an alarming, expression of fundamentalism in areas where such incidents never occurred before. So this is happening, and it is very worrying. But at the same time, I think I also have seen a worrying phenomenon of ethnic groups multiply and ethnic polarization grow. For example, certain Sindhi press will give coverage to only certain people, Urdu press to only certain people. I think there's a sense of insecurity overall, which is causing people to shrink back into their familiar haunts and go back to the comfort zone, as they say. That's why I think that, events like this, in which people from different ethnicities, different religions, different sects sit together and talk to each other as as patriotic people who love their country and want to make change. I think this is the only way forward. And to answer your question, yes, I am disturbed by all this fundamentalism, and I think we need to fight it back with even greater fervor.
Okay, last question, please.
My name is Dr. Nazma. I am a gynecologist by profession, and I also go to interior for medical camps. And do you think the democracy train can reach its destination without land reforms, without educating the masses in the interior of Sindh who can only vote, the Haris can only vote for their landlords? Similarly, in Punjab, the Biradri system can only vote for their whatever Sardar says, or Sardari system. So do you think the democracy train has any chance of reaching the destination without these reforms, education, and enlightenment of the masses?
Absolutely, and I think you answer your own question, because I think that my whole attempt to paint rural Sindh has been also through the lens of feudal lords. For example, I had a very intimate sitting with some of the top feudal lords under Benazir, and I have tried to expose their mindset. The level of contempt that they show to the people who were in Benazir's first government, lower middle class people. I think feudalism, really, I consider it a state of mind, and it not only oppresses peasants, it oppresses women, it oppresses intellectuals. It is a thought, it is a poison. And unless, of course, we have education, unless the thought process changes, that doesn't change. So to answer your question, of course we need reforms. Of course we cannot have a genuine democracy until these major barriers are leveled, unless we have a plain field, a plain playing field. And many people ask whether this is a democracy, the one we just experienced. But I still say, and it's my belief, that I still prefer the fact that we had 5 years without military interference. Because as I have documented in my book, the period between 1988 to 1999 was the most turbulent, in the sense that no government completed their tenure. Benazir Bhutto ruled twice, Nawaz Sharif ruled twice. If Zardari has managed to pull through 5 years through wheeling and dealing, it is still a positive step that the government was not interrupted midway, because the psychological damage that does, and in terms of unraveling the types of projects that a government institutes, that I think it disturbs the whole nation. So good democracy, bad democracy, it has to continue. But of course the reforms are very essential.
Right, thank you very much. It seems we are run out of time now. I'll thank Nafisa Hoodbhai, and I hope that she'll continue writing and she'll come up with other books also in future. Thank you very much. I must also announce that this book about the democracy train, A Journey Through Pakistan's Last Decade of Democracy by Nafisa Hoodbhai is there, available for sale. And I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being such a nice audience. Thank you.